some killer guitar music as we start the show. Good evening and welcome to 2000 Mock Ad Hoc. And I'm your host, Johnny B. I help fantasy owners prepare for the preseason and get set for your live draft. Or I guess your online draft if you're that type of person. Gag me. Basically, we got the crew back in here. We got Dave Delmonico. We got Quinn joining us tonight. Real quick, Dave, how you feeling, Seahawk fan? Can't believe you're on my show.
Feel pretty good. I'm certainly doing better than you right now. I'm not having guys retire left and right, so that's encouraging.
Yeah, well, I still wear it proud. I'm not going to give up the hat here on the show, but
we don't want your type anyways.
Can't wait to at least steal one win where the 12th man is just like, whoa, what happened? The Niners came in and Kaepernick threw into Torrey Smith. Can you imagine?
First time for everything, I guess.
Quinn, let's throw it over to you. Is that an avatar or is that a real hat? What is that?
Hey, Johnny B, Dave. This is my Dr. Seuss Pittsburgh Steelers hat that I bought in the parking lot of Tempe Diablo Stadium before Super Bowl 30, Steelers Cowboys. It was almost the dream that came true until Larry Brown stood in the middle of nowhere and caught 2 interceptions that made him the MVP and the $40 million man for the Raiders. Great to be here. And I just wanted to say, 25 years of Seahawk jokes with Dave. I would literally call him 10 years ago and say, Dave, I saw somebody in the gym with a Seahawk shirt. That's the other guy. There's 2 of you, right?
You couldn't even buy a Seahawk shirt 20 years ago.
Now that they're winning and going to Super Bowls, there's Seahawk fans everywhere. I got to come up with some new humor here, Johnny B. Maybe you can help me. I don't think the Niners are going to do much for me, but I don't know. Maybe we could jump on the Rams bandwagon or Arizona Cardinals, something like that. So.
Yeah, you never know. This year, you certainly never know. It's really the toughest division in football, and it's going to be an interesting one for sure. But
Arizona will be very competitive right until Carson Palmer gets hurt.
Yeah, God, that was tough last year to watch. I'm such a big fan of his. But, hey, we'll get right into it. Here's a show where we usually talk about mock drafts, right? We're going to talk about sequential drafting, where to take guys and why, and who has talent and who doesn't, and we'll talk about that on another piece. But tonight, it's still early enough. This is June, and we're going to talk about 2015 draft strategies. And so we're going to kick it over to Dave first. There's a number of them out there, Dave. Give me what your strategy is for this year.
Well, I think, we're still looking at how many guys there are that have that first round real value on them. A lot of guys are going to see Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers in that first round. Calvin Johnson's been a first round pick the last few years. But I think if you're going to succeed, because there's a lot of running back by committee, you want to jump up and grab a running back in that first round. If you can get yourself a stud, you can move on and feel comfortable from there, because if you get a stud running back, now I can cobble together in the later rounds 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are in a timeshare that I think are going to become my hopefully solid running back too. And that's what will really help make your team a success. You got Adrian Peterson or Marshawn Lynch or Jamal Charles. You lock those guys down. They get you your guaranteed points every week, and then you start finding and searching waiver wires every week, looking for the next C.J. Anderson to step in and be your number 2 back that carries you to success after you spend 3 rounds drafting wide receivers.
That's pretty interesting. So definitely the running back heavy strategy has been around for years. When I first started fantasy football, that's all we knew. I don't think I ever saw anybody deviating from that. And hey, that's a good strategy, I think. Just for the listeners, Dave doesn't lose leagues. I already said it before, but he's not welcome in my league. He's too good. And so, that's a good strategy. I like it. But Quinn, let's turn it over to you. And what do you have to say about that? Running back heavy, is that your MO? What's yours?
Try make it rhyme, Quinn.
Yeah. Well, I'm an old school guy, and I think the last couple of years the running back first strategy was not the way to go. But I'm cycling back. I'm old school. I wear 21-year-old Dr. Seuss hats. I own a business, and I don't have my email come to my phone. I handwrite letters. I'm an old school guy, and I think this is a year where you're going to want to make sure you have 2 good running backs. And the reason being, you used to win leagues with running backs, and then the league is still pass happy, but how many phenomenal top 10 receivers last year went undrafted? We're going to find those guys all over the board. If you don't have two top 15 running backs, you're going to have trouble competing. So I'm going to go with the best available player, but I am looking to have two strong, dominant running backs. We're in a league right now where you have rotating backs. You take superstar, all-pro players out in the red zone or on third down and long or on fourth and short. It's this league where, the coaches are out coaching themselves. So you really only have...
Maybe you don't even give it to your stud running back on the 1 yard line to win the Super Bowl. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen.
And the reality of it, I mean, we are joking, but the reality of that is that is the league.
There's no joking. It's not funny.
How many times do you watch a team, and Jamal Charles is a perfect example. Here's one of the most talented players of the last 30 years. He'll get 7, 8, 10 touches in a series, drive them all the way down to the 1 yard line. And even though the guy has 50 touchdowns in his career, they're going to take him out and put a bigger back in because he's going to get hurt on the goal line. So when you have a guy like an Adrian Peterson or a Matt Forte or a Le'Veon Bell, or there's only a handful of them. If you can get two of those guys, you're going to have an advantage because the other people are, like Dave said, he's hoping to piece in a second running back. So yeah. I want two studs that I can count on every week because we don't know who the next great quarterback's going to be. I mean, maybe the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks if Brady's not suspended, maybe it's Jimmy Garoppolo. Who knows?
But those two stud running backs are going to leave you deficient at the wide receiver position. If I can get Dez Bryant and A.J. Green to go with Marshawn Lynch, I feel like down the stretch I'm going to be able to find one receiver late that's going to do something or on the waiver wire or another running back that's going to help me later too. So the two running backs is you're sacrificing. You're a little top-heavy, I feel. When you're at the wide receiver position, you'll be a little thin.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, and for the listeners out there, I mean, running back heavy's been around for years. I'm sure everyone's thinking, yeah, I already know that part. What about this? Tell me about this running back strategy where it's like the Lone Ranger technique, right? Where you take one really good top, let's say top 10 running back, I'll even say that or extend it out that way, but the Lone Ranger is you take the running back right away, and you don't take another running back until, let's say, early round 4 or 5 to try to cover your bet in case that guy gets injured. Dave, talk to me about this single running back technique. Is that a good draft strategy?
Pretty much what I'm talking about. I want one stud, and my second running back is going to come from somewhere. I mean, he might even be a guy who you don't even think is going to play yet. Somebody's going to get hurt that's in a timeshare. A Nile Davis, if something happens to Jamal Charles where he was down for a couple of weeks, and you plug in Nile Davis and he does great, or you get C.J. Anderson who's in a splitting carries with Ball and he gets hurt and all of a sudden he's a superstar based on how that's going. So you get guys that look like they're going to share. You don't necessarily know. They fall down draft boards. You got Joique Bell and Amir Abdullah. Those two guys look like they're going to share a little bit, but if one of those guys emerges, maybe you draft both of them relatively in the 6th and 7th round back-to-back, so that you have the Detroit Lions running back if one of them emerges, and you kind of piece it together. As long as you got somebody up top who's really going to carry you, you can afford to take some chances. You're going to end up with 5 running backs. You only need one of those 4 to be proficient, not even excellent, to make your team pretty solid if you've got 2 stud wide receivers to go with a Marshawn Lynch or Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, so basically, so far we got the running back heavy. We got this Lone Ranger where you just take one solid running back. I'll throw in my 2 cents right now.
All tight ends?
Talk about basically what, I'm all about, right? The upside-down drafting technique. Now it's got some corporate term from HR, zero running back. Come on, please. It's always been upside-down drafting. I'll credit Matt Waldman there, footballdice.com. He's basically the guy who invented it. I don't care what anybody says. But here's a situation where I'm looking at it a little differently, and I think the reason I've been so successful with this technique, and it depends on your league scoring, okay? It depends on how many guys you have in your league, and it depends how tight ends are basically measured or scored as well. But taking a wide receiver as your first choice, or even Gronkowski, okay, I'll throw that out this year, I just feel that's the way to go because you'll always have a head and shoulders look every week on a matchup, straight up, straight down, advantage over your opponent. And then I can take chances on running backs. I've said this in the earlier podcast. I got Trey Mason, I got Jeremy Hill, and I got C.J. Anderson last year in the draft. And a lot of people were like, man, you're really throwing darts at these rookies. And they all panned out because I did have Marshawn Lynch. I got him as my second running back, but I took Demaryius Thomas as my first pick. So I'm all about this I'll even throw the term out, zero running back. Can't believe I'm saying it. Quinn, what do you think about my upside down drafting technique this year? What would you say about that strategy?
I don't have an issue with it. In reality, it always comes down to take the best available player. And that's why I try to enter drafts with a very flexible mindset. Even if I come in thinking, hey, I want a top 4 quarterback or I want 2 top 10 running backs, if they're not available, I'm going to go to the best available player. And so that would be the best advice I can give people. You have to be flexible. No matter how much you plan, you're going to get curveballs. You're going to get people who take, you're going to get, I remember the back, 25 years ago, the Raider fan who had the first pick and took Todd Marinovich because, we live in Orange County and he was from here. You're going to have people that do that stuff. So you have to take the best available player. And so I may go in thinking I want 2 top 10 backs, but if that doesn't happen, I'm going to go right into the next thing of getting the next available quarterback or wide receiver. And I've gone in thinking I want 2 running backs, and I don't take any in the first 5 rounds.
Well, I think Dr. Seuss makes a good point, but it's best available player at a given position. I really don't like overall ranks other than for value. Right, I want to see if the guy should go in the first round, second round, or really I'm ranking them by picks. If you're in a 10-team league and you're going to draft 5 running backs, you really only need to rank 50 running backs to figure out where you're at. So you want to see where those guys are going to fall on an overall list from a whole draft perspective so that you can get value. But at the same time, if I've got 2 receivers and last year Antonio Brown is sitting on the board, do I need Antonio Brown? No, I need a running back. So I got to take the best running back, even though you might have Antonio Brown rated higher if you already had receivers, or if you had 2 running backs and there was a 3rd running back, Arian Foster, sitting there, you would have to take Antonio Brown because you can't be too heavy at one position because those players are going to dry up. You also got to watch your fellow drafters. If they're loading up on running backs, you need to get a couple receivers because they're not going to need running backs coming up. They've got their running backs, so the running backs will be there. If everybody took 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, get yourself some receivers and watch the way the draft is unfolding. But positionally, I take the best player available at the position of need. It's not a real team; it's a fantasy team. You need to fill out your starting lineup. You need to fill out your positions all the way across the board.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's very well said. I think Dave and Quinn bring up some good points, taking the best available. In my opinion, I still think you need a plan going in just so you have something to go off of instead of buying the gag mag at the grocery store and hustling in your workout attire to the draft and looking like that guy that's like, oh, I don't prepare at all, I don't care, it doesn't make a difference if I research anything, it's all luck. Those guys I welcome to the league, so I'd say, to what everybody's saying, you take the best guy available, but I think you do have to have a plan going in, so whatever that plan may be, let's just talk about briefly. I don't think anybody in the room here is very high on this strategy, but it's out there. I got a guy in my league. If he has the number 4 or number 3 overall pick, he's taking Aaron Rodgers or Peyton Manning. Quinn, talk to me about a quarterback-first strategy. I mean, there's people out there that they have to do it. Why? Tell me why.
Well, for years that's been the case. I'm the kind of guy who, for decades, sometimes waits till the 6th or 7th round to take my first quarterback. I've kind of changed my philosophy. Let's face it, when I was doing that successfully, quarterbacks were maybe throwing for 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. Now They're throwing for 5,000 yards and 40, 50 touchdowns.
Right.
So there is a distinguishable difference between those first 4 or 5 guys and 9 and 10. So I understand that. It's a quarterback league. You don't win Super Bowls without quarterbacks. It's what people talk about the most. They date the supermodels. They marry the supermodels. They're the ones going to Disneyland. They're the ones in the news the most. So I understand that philosophy of I need a strong quarterback. And again, I hate to keep saying best available player, but if the first 3 or 4 quarterbacks are gone, I'm going to sit tight because I can get 5 or 6 in the 4th round. So I think it kind of brings up a good point, Jonathan, about drafting strategy. I hate being 1 or 8 or 10, whatever your draft is. And Dave can attest to this. I got the #1 draft in my league last year, and I traded it for the #5 pick. And I got nothing in return. I just don't like to be 1, and I don't like to be at the front or the end. And my philosophy on that is you know who you want, and they all get taken the 2 or 3 picks before you, and then you have to rush on 2 picks, and you have to wait an hour to pick again. So I like being in the middle, 3, 4, 5, 6, wherever that is. And then that way you got some time to react, because no matter how well you plan, you don't know what's going to happen in front of you until it does, right? You could say, okay, the 5th quarterback's not going until the 3rd round, but when someone takes quarterback #2, the next guy takes quarterback #3, the next guy takes quarterback #4, and now everything's sped up and you have to react, and that #5 quarterback that you were going to get in the 5th round, you might need to take him in the 2nd round.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. No doubt. I mean, it's true. There's a lot of things that happen on the fly. Dave, what do you have to say about that on the quarterback first type of draft strategy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't generally like it. I think one of the important things to remember, I think last year was interesting. A couple different leagues, there were guys who were dying to get their hands on Peyton Manning. And you got to read the trends a little bit. I think it's important to understand that because somebody did something last year doesn't mean they're going to repeat it this year. And Peyton Manning's a great quarterback. And he was a good pick last year. I think he was maybe even a great pick. You're not going to go wrong with taking a guy who was fantastic last year. But let's not forget that we're drafting based on what we think guys are going to do this year, not what they did last year. And last year's a great indicator. But Gronkowski won't be quite as good because it looks like Brady will be out for 4 games, although they'll probably overturn it because he's Tom Brady. Some of these quarterbacks and stuff, yeah, it's repeatable. They're going to throw for a lot of yards, but the separation between Andrew Luck and Matthew Stafford, who you can get in the 7th round, is not as significant maybe as the difference between your top-tier running backs and your second-tier running backs. So I think you want to look at that. If I'm picking in a 12-team league and Aaron Rodgers is there or Andrew Luck is there at 12, I'm probably going to take him based on value, but I'm not taking him at 4 or 5. And I'm not taking him just because I'm excited about what he did last year. It's got to be a value pick. And even if I was picking 12, I would actually not pick him at 12. I'd pick him at 13, so I could say I take him in the 2nd round instead of the 1st, because I don't want to take him in the 1st.
Right. No. Right. I mean, that's pretty true. I mean, that's why we're talking about this stuff. And it is early in June, and there's one last strategy here. You can take tight end first, but read my book. You'll figure that out. Here's what I'm going to do right now. We're going to go for a little ad hoc talk right now.
Oh my God! If you're from New England and you got to take Gronkowski in the 1st round, do it. Take it. Oh.
Absolutely. So here we go, Quinn. Take a look at my board real quick. I think at this point in the show, I think people want to see. All right, let's say this is all you have to choose, right? The marquee guys are already off the board. Let's say you're the 7th pick, right? 7th pick in a 10-man draft. What are you going to do here? Left on my board right now.
That's a very good question. Yeah, it came down. I'm taking Luck. I think Andrew Luck is fantasy-wise going to be the best quarterback in the NFL. They just don't want to run the ball. They can't run block. They have no running backs. They're going to continue to pass 40-plus times a game. I think he's the guy right there. If I had to take a running back, I'm going to go with LeSean McCoy. Buffalo, it doesn't matter who you are. We've been seeing it for a decade. You could be a guy you've never heard of. Whoever is the starting running back at Buffalo gets 100-plus yards a game till he gets hurt. Then his replacement you never heard of gets 100 yards, and his replacement gets 100 yards. They're running back university, so he's got a chip on his shoulder from what happened in Philly. I like him. And receiver-wise, Julio's just a monster. He's too big, too fast for everybody. The Falcons are just atrocious defensively. They're going to be in shootouts every week. Julio's healthy. He's going to be a monster. Maybe the number one receiver in the entire NFL, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Dave. Take a shot at it. You're the number 7 pick. This is what you're looking at left on a board of premier players that have already been taken.
I'll give it to you this way. I don't know if you can see this, but here's how I generally map out my first 2 picks, if not 3 picks. If I throw that up there and you can kind of see that, I'm just going to write down. I've got 7, 8, 9, 10. I know I'm picking 7 and 14. Okay. And now I've got to decide how many running backs are left on the board and how many receivers are left on the board, because I want to target 2 players here. And which ones do I want? If I take Lynch, then I'm looking good, right? I've got Lynch, and then there's Forte, DeMarco Murray, Arian Foster, LaShawn McCoy. Those guys are all still going to be there. So there's like 3, 4 good running backs. I figure 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 6 picks between my picks. There's a lot of good receivers. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 receivers that I want. So I don't consider Andre Johnson or Mike Evans worthy of a second-round pick. Gronkowski would be, but I don't consider. You got Rodgers and Manning. So you got a couple of really good things. You got a good split. You're going to get one guy that's a running back, one guy that's a receiver. But I'm also going to look at the first 6 picks. If I know that all the guys in the front of me took 6 running backs, then I'm going to take a running back and then the receiver, because I'm going to get to pick before them coming back the other way. So I take the receiver first, or the running back first, then it comes back around, and I'll get the receiver before all the guys who pick running back first have to pick a receiver. I'm going to take that receiver going back before it gets to them. So I'm extrapolating that out for those first 2 picks. I'm always looking. If I'm picking 10 and 11 in a 10-team league, it's great because I can pick back-to-back. I can control it, but I got to wait a long time. But here I'm going to take Marshawn Lynch. I'm going to wait and hope I get Jordy Nelson or Julio Jones.
Yeah, no, good stuff, and that's kind of the fun of it right now. It's still really early to talk about all this, and you never know. I mean, the guys that I just pulled off of this board, in your league or the listeners that are out there, they're probably thinking, well, those guys wouldn't be available, or the guys that he pulled off would be available. Yeah. But hey, that's the fun of the show right now. We're just doing some ad hoc here.
But realistically, if you look at that, somebody like Quinn said, he's going to take Andrew Luck. So if I take Lynch, somebody's going to take a quarterback. Somebody's going to take another quarterback. Rodgers is going to go. Then there's only 4 more picks to come off of there. You're going to get somebody really good coming back, but you're not going to get a good running back if you take a receiver. The 3 running backs or 4 running backs will be gone by the time you get to 14. So you need the running back so you can get the receiver coming back.
So let me ask you this, Quinn, real quick, and we're going to wrap this thing up. But let's say you do get Marshawn Lynch right here, okay? Let's say you do secure him. Are you a big stacking kind of guy? And what I mean by the definition of stacking is, are you going to try to get Russell Wilson with him or even the Seattle Seahawks defense with him? That's a double stack in my opinion. Is that something you're after, or are you just looking at, like you say, the best available pick and it doesn't matter about stacking?
No, I take an opposite approach. And Dave, nice pull with extrapolate. Maybe next time we can do a ad hoc spelling bee. I'd like to see if he could spell that.
Thank you, Mr. Dictionary.
I doubt that he could. But, no, I'm actually the exact opposite. If the best available player is just glaring and glowing, that guy, I'm going to take him. But, again, I go for consistency. I want to spread things out. And if you have those 2 guys, the great quarterback and the great receiver, you're going to blow people out some weeks and you're going to really stink it up the other week. So if I had 2 equal receivers and I had a quarterback from one team, I would take the guy from the other team. I'm all about balance. That's just my approach, to be consistent. And going back real quick, I'm going to show you guys real quick. I'm reading this book right now on the 70s Steelers, their life's work. And we keep talking about best available, but the greatest book of all time was the 1974 Steelers draft, where they got 4 Hall of Famers out of one draft, and Donnie Shell as well, which wasn't even a Hall of Famer. And their whole philosophy was getting the top 200 players, and they just wanted the best available player. It didn't matter if he played at Kent State like a Jack Lambert. It didn't matter if he was too skinny like a Mike Webster. They just rated players based off what they saw, and you take the best available. So sometimes, you might come in thinking you want 3 receivers or you want 2 backs, but, you have to take what's left on the board. As they say in life, you can't always determine what's going to happen, but you get to decide how you're going to react to it. So having a game plan is great, but if the auction or the draft turns in another direction, you have to be prepared to react to that.
That's right. You never know when your podcast partner is going to wear a Dr. Seuss hat. So sometimes you just have to roll with it and see if he'll rhyme words together and make funny sayings. I don't know what's going to happen.
And you have 2 guys, Jonathan. You always have, we talked about, Lone Ranger. You always have a quarterback guy, the guy who has to take 3 quarterbacks in the first 6 rounds. And then we're in Southern California. We always have USC guy, the guy who went to USC and has to take every USC player that ever played there. And I'm sure if you're in the Midwest, you're over there, or down in the South, you got SEC guy or Alabama guy or whatever it is. But those guys are going to show up, and if this guy's got to take the USC receiver that nobody's going to take in any of the first 15 rounds, if he's got to take him in the 5th round, let him
do it.
You just have to do that.
So going back to your original question, I have one point on that. I do not generally like to stack players. I don't think the Seahawks defense has anything to do with Marshawn Lynch because that's a totally different scenario. But I love to get my quarterback paired up with my 3rd receiver. Now, last year is a good example, and I didn't have T.Y. Hilton. But if you've got 2 really good receivers, Demaryius Thomas and A.J. Green, and Andrew Luck's your quarterback, if you can get Andre Johnson or T.Y. Hilton as your 2nd or 3rd, preferably your 3rd receiver, if you can pair up your 3rd wide receiver so you're not dependent on him with your quarterback, that's a really nice bonus every time your quarterback hooks up with him. So I really look to take my 3rd wide receiver and pair him with my quarterback if I can. Roddy White with Matt Ryan or something like that. You chasing your beard?
Yeah.
And I think that's an excellent point, Dave, because let's face it. Let's say, Johnny, that you match your number 1 running back with your number 1 quarterback. When you're winning a game and dominating, you're going to be run heavy. When you're losing, you're going to be heavy. So you're not necessarily dominating in that sense. Where that I kind of agree with Dave there with that 3rd receiver. It's kind of one of those things where your quarterback, when he's passing a lot, he's spreading the field, he's hitting 4 or 5 different receivers. It's kind of a different way to look at it, but I don't think the stacking necessarily, it's just not a good strategy in my opinion. That's just the way I look at it.
Good. No, good. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that probably have questions about that or are curious, and I think in some leagues that may work depending on your defensive scoring. In other leagues it won't, but I'm always curious to see how people react to that. And
I think there's a lot of people that wonder how long you were on Arrested Development or how you got to be the star of Superbad. I mean, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, I'm Michael Cera. I don't know if anybody knows this, but I mean, I sound like him. About 10 years ago, I looked like him. Now I'm older and probably don't, but yeah, you never know. And Quinn's Dr. Seuss.
Well, you've got about 5 inches, 6 inches on him, and I hope you get a good blowjay tonight.
Yeah, well, hey, we'll see how it goes. But, hey, man, closing comments real quick. Dave, thanks for being on. I appreciate all the time here. But Dave DeMonico, the 12th man of the Seahawks. And, here's a Seahawk fan who actually has a Joe Montana college jersey. It's not a Niner jersey, but it's a college jersey. And still, you're okay in my book because you got Joe's signature on that thing.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on.
Joe is a Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh guy, by the way. Just had to throw that in.
Well, there you go, Quinn. Absolutely, and
still not rhyming.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for taking the time out. Hopefully, you got a little bit of information tonight on draft strategy. It's still early. It's June, but hey, check us out on Twitter. I'm UDDWorks, and check out Dave at his handle. He's Seahawks1212. And for Quinn Conley and the Steelers, for my Niners, who are going to be in last place, thanks for tuning in. Have a good night. We'll see you next time on Mock Ad Hoc.
I don't have Twitter yet. I'm old school.